Okay, so I will kick off. I'm going to talk about the polluter elites and the cyber elites and how um, their common problems are, and how their common problems manifest, and how we move to common solutions. So when I talk about polluter elite, I'm talking about the most powerful and influential within the sectors. So I'm talking about senior managers of major corporations in the fossil fuel industry, in high carbon polluting sectors like coal utilities, aviation, cement, steel, the military, and also services that support those industries. So finance and advertising, lobbying, certain media organizations as well. And then also the overconsumers, the world's wealthiest that we've just heard about from Astrid, and also political supporters of overconsumption. When I talk about the cyber elite, I'm talking about, some of the people that we've already been hearing about, senior managers and owners of major corporations in the information and technology, information and communications industry. And I use that term more because it's distinguishes a bit more from tech, which is such a vague term and can mean so many things. So I'm talking about artificial intelligence, social media, cryptocurrencies, automated weapons, and again, services for these sectors and political supporters of these sectors. So I'm going to talk about three common interests. So let's jump straight in. Energy intensification. So in the polluter elite, we've got the fossil fuel industry is already profiting from high energy use. It's still responsible for 81% of the world's total energy supply. And global energy demand is still increasing. And that sector, already energy intense in its use, is becoming more energy intense as there is a move towards unconventional fossil fuel sources. So things like tar sands, deep sea oil reserves, deep mining, shale formations, and the use of fracking to extract oil and gas from those formations. And again, these things eat into they cause higher costs, and so eat into profits and wealth of the producers and the consumers in the polluter elite. In the ICT sector, you've got a similar trend towards greater energy use, particularly around building data centers for AI, and cryptocurrencies are also very energy intensive. Andrew talked about some of the figures. I'll just give you one about the from the International Energy Agency, which is projecting global energy consumption by data centers to rise by about 130% by 2030, equal to the whole of the electricity consumption by a country like Japan. This is leading to new contracts with the nuclear industry in a particularly controversial area. And a particular example of this is Microsoft's deal with the owners of 3 Mile Island. And those of you with long memories will remember that's the site of the US's worst nuclear accident, where there was a partial meltdown of a reactor there. So particularly concerning that they want to continue nuclear production there. Again, higher costs are associated with it, with this energy intensification trend, and that's eating into profits and wealth. And also, AI is being used by the fossil fuel industry, so there's another connection there. This is being used to increase the efficiency of extraction of oil, and they were an early adopter of this technology. So another link between the two sectors. The second common interest I want to talk about is around deregulation, and the examples here in the fossil fuel industry facing increasing regulations due to climate targets, other environmental targets, curbing fossil fuel use, and supporting the alternative industries, particularly renewable energy and energy efficiency. This is leading the fossil fuel industry to try and develop new technologies to maintain fossil fuel use, so carbon capture, blue hydrogen, and again, there are higher costs associated with this. Then you've got the legal risks that they face through breaching any of the regulations. High carbon using industries are also subject to these costs and over consumers too. In the ICT industry, you've got a whole range of issues around regulation on social media, for example, due to online abuse, incitement to violence, child pornography, election interference. The list is very long and it's increasingly applied to AI. Cryptocurrencies are also an issue. And then there, of course, is the data center construction that will increasingly bump up against climate and water use regulations. And again, regulations on any new partnerships with the nuclear power industry. The third area is probably the least well known, is around militarization. The fossil fuel industry has a long history of entanglement with the militaries. Militaries were early adopters of fossil fuels. Warships were an early user of coal. Um, Tanks and combat aircraft were an early adopter of oil, and oil reserves themselves have been a key factor in wars for over a century. I mean, even since the First World War. And then, of course, military craft are heavily dependent on fossil fuels, very intensive users, and it's a very hard sector to decarbonize. But again, also the sector is very profitable, very profitable customer for the fossil fuel industry. Militarization with the ICT industry is a much more recent development, but it has been going on for a couple of decades, particularly related to command and control systems within the military. And of course, it's increasing now with the greater use of military drones, AI, and autonomous systems in general. And the dependencies are increasing to such an extent that the UN recently pointed out that Microsoft, Google, and Amazon were embedded, as they described it, in the Israeli genocide on Gaza because of their supply of services to the Israeli government. We've seen a situation where previous commitments by ICT companies, Google, for example, to minimize military work are now being discarded. Meanwhile, attempts at the international level to strengthen arms control agreements to adapt to the new technologies are being bogged down in negotiations. But again, the ICT industry is finding very profitable links with the military. So it's leading to a number of common positions and activities. So support for deregulation, increasing military spending, increasing support for right-wing politicians, including the far right, and a whole bunch of activities around funding for political allies, taking on government roles. For example, Elon Musk and Chris Wright, the fracking king in the US, and building links with nuclear industries. And we talked about that already, but we can talk more about that in the Q&A perhaps. So how are these industries vulnerable, and how can we start to change this? Well, I think it's important to realize just how much the polluter elite is threatened by costs. The fossil fuel industry is very threatened by increasing costs. Energy efficiency and renewable technologies are now much cheaper in most areas. And there's the ever-present threat of peak oil and gas, which could come sooner rather than later. And that will drive up costs particularly. Another issue is the degree to which the low carbon economy and the environmental economy is a major employer. The low carbon sector is now estimated to employ 37 million people globally, more than the fossil fuel sector. It's now overtaken it, overtook it in the last few years. And so, and a lot of low carbon sectors are labor intensive. So, for example, home insulation, rooftop solar, for example. So that number is only going to increase. And don't underestimate the public backlash over towards the polluter elite over climate and environmental issues. And we talked about private jets, space tourism is another one. So those are also areas of vulnerability. If we look at the cyber elite, there are also vulnerabilities. Some of these overlap. Jobs is another issue. Increasing automation due to ICTs are helping employers or encouraging employers to move from a pyramid structure whereby there was a lot of jobs at the bottom of the pyramid, junior roles, employing a lot of people, and then moving to a diamond structure whereby there are much lower numbers of junior employees because AI is taking over those jobs. And this threat is a much more real threat than many of the bogus arguments you hear about immigration from the far right. The risk of an AI industry stock market crash is very real. We've heard warnings from the Bank of England, the International Monetary Fund, as well as people within the sector itself, that is coming. The sector is vastly overvalued and it's going to face a crash within the next 1 or 2 years. The whole issue about data centers pushing up energy and water bills, that's already happening in the US and could happen in other countries as well. And then there's also issues around online threats to children, public backlash over environmental threats as well, that campaigners and politicians could capitalize if we want to try and control these industries more fully. And then I'll conclude. The more that we talk about a better future due to a move to a more sustainable, just, low carbon society and all the benefits it could raise, that is an argument that we don't use enough about the positive future that could arise if we control these industries much more tightly. Okay, thank you.